All right, here we go. Well, let's try this one. Let's get into this right away here. We got a golf game we got to get ready for. But anyways, welcome to today. So the Daily Restaurant Show. I'm trying not to say the SVK Network because we're a part of the SVK Network now. But we have a great episode featuring the one and only, all the way from England. You're in England, right, Kris?
England, yeah, UK.
Yes, UK. Is that what you guys do? You call it like UK over there?
Well, yeah, England, Britain, UK. We've got many different words depending on where you are.
So, Kris is the founder and creator of the Burn Chef Project, which is one of the most incredible things out there in our industry to help people with mental illness, removing the stigmatization around it for hospitality industry. And we are super excited to have Kris on the Daily Restaurant Show. So welcome, Kris. I'm going to pull down this so I can see you. There we go. Welcome, buddy.
Thanks for having me. It's as we were just discussing, it's absolutely mad that 4 years ago I started taking some photos in the south of England, and we met in Toronto 4 or 5 weeks ago. It's just thanks for having me.
No, we're not going to point out your sunburn either.
Oh man, I knew you'd do this. Yeah. So yeah, we're not used to sun in this country, and I definitely have. Yeah, I put glasses on. It's a real thing. There we go. See, we've got two-tone.
Oh, there you go. That shows the burn.
Yeah, it's good. That's all you can see.
It looks really good.
Show, right?
So let's get into this because I know you have to go to a golf game as well, and that's important. I think it's very important. Well, we got to help. We got to make sure you get that time away from doing all the amazing things you're doing all the time. Have a little me time, but I do want to ask you a lot of questions because let's first of all talk about the Burn Chef Project because I'm sure you get asked this all the time. But also, I want to learn about what it is for our listeners in Canada and in the US. But also, where did this start? Like, where did your personal journey start around this? And how did you get all started in this?
Yeah, so someone asked me this question today. They're like, where on earth did this come from? And I'll say the same thing that I said to them, which was, this was a complete accident. And it was an accident that was born from my own personal experience of mental illness. And I worked in the food wholesale network myself. So I was a sales manager for a food wholesaler. And I absolutely, I've always worked in bars and various other bits and bobs alongside my main job. But I fell in love with this sector when I was working full-time supplying restaurants. But things started to crumble for me. Like, my relationships were starting to suffer, my work was starting to suffer, and all because I was dealing with mental illness, or I thought I was dealing with mental illness in the usual ways that we do, which is drink and risk-taking behavior. And it culminated in me just having a complete and utter meltdown. I broke because I couldn't talk to anyone about what I was going through. It was a disgusting, dirty secret, or so I thought at the time. So I went through therapy. I went through 2 years of self-discovery in terms of finding out who actually I was, because I had no fucking clue. And after that period, I realized that actually I wasn't alone. I genuinely thought I was the only person in the world to have experienced mental illness. I still, even now, when I got to the therapist's office, I remember looking over my shoulder to make sure that no one had followed me there, because it was such a bad secret, right? So I started taking photos in hospitality industry. So you can see behind me, and for those who can't see, these black and white photos with shadow over half the face. And they were designed to show that more goes on behind the scenes than you might think. You never really know what's going through someone's brain, and just to be mindful of that and have a conversation. And thus the Burn Chef Project, which was a photography campaign initially, was born. And I still remember my first photo, right? So I made it my age. I said, look, I take photos of your menu. I supply you with the ingredients. I want to take a photo. It's a moody photo. It's black and white. You up for it? He went, yeah, fucking let's get in here. Let's take this photo. So he posed, got the photo. He was like, that photo is awesome. He said, I'm going to share that all over my social media. That's a really cool photo. Thanks, mate. And he goes, what's it for? And I said, it's to raise awareness for mental health, something we've all got. And he went, don't, no, I'm not sharing that. He said, don't put that anywhere. I said, what do you mean? Like, I'm not saying you've got mental illness, and I get the stigma attached to it. He says, no, I don't want it anywhere. Like, you're going to damage my career. You're going to ruin, my job and what people think of me. And that was so interesting for me. I was like, but just shows in real time stigma and the power that actually that this conversation has had. Anyway, 400 or 500 photos later, and fast forward 4 years on,
wow,
the Burnt Chef project has come on to do great things.
So I have a question for you on that. What's the face of mental illness to you? What's that face look like?
Face of mental illness. It looks
because like you've taken all these pictures, and I see the pictures behind you and stuff, and on your website, and everything's very strong in that area as well. But what's it look like to you? What's that face look like?
If I was to picture it in my head,
yeah, what's it look like?
Mental illness, I think. I don't think you'd see it. For me, in my mind, it's like best analogy or the best image that I can put into people's head is, that Grim Reaper wears that massive hood, right, that covers up his face.
Yeah.
Not necessarily Grim Reaper-esque, not that sort of gothic style, but more sort of like having it draped over. Like, and do you know what? Probably the best thing that I can use to describe it is how I felt when I was in like a pit of depression when I was much younger. Was I went to a party, and I went to the party because I wanted to keep up the facade that I was well and I wasn't really struggling. But I sat in the corner and I put my hood over my head and I just pretended like I was invisible. And so I think if I was to picture the face of mental illness, I think it's that hidden, shadowed face, like, hide me. You can't talk about me, because if you talk about me, bad things will happen, which is completely false.
Do you find more and more people now are kind of looking at people that maybe don't have those hoods put overhead and realizing that it's like the pictures in the back where it's just a chef that looks like he's a normal chef? Do you see a lot of that normalcy?
Yeah, I think what we have recognized as a society, or we're growing to recognize, we're definitely in the early stages, is that we are all human, right? We're human beings. We're built of flesh, blood. It doesn't matter what your race, sex, religion, it doesn't matter about any of those things. We're all exactly the same in terms of we're animals on this planet. And one thing that resonates massively with all of us is that desire to be seen and understood, and not to have to hide our true authentic selves. And when you start to challenge something like stigma, which is felt so strongly through society in various different guises and roles, standing up and telling people and talking about this openly suddenly creates that connection. It creates that feeling of being seen and understood, because all of a sudden you're not alone. That thing that you've kept so hidden and secret, now there's someone in front of you going, hey, yeah, this is exactly how I felt, but it's okay. You're only human. You're going to get these times in life where perhaps you do become unwell, or there's something biologically that causes that, and it's all right. And actually talking about it is okay, because you're not a robot. So we've found that there's so much power in being able to share these conversations. And I love a challenge. I love the people who go, well, mental health isn't a thing. You just have to get over it, or you just have to think differently and you'll be okay. And I love those conversations. You get me right in the thick of it, because
I can imagine.
I just like to challenge that understanding, even on a basic scientific level.
Well, I think our generation, the generation before, like our parents and their parents, there was that, like in Canada here, it's like, guys don't cry, right? Or guys don't show emotions, or people don't show those emotions, right? And now it's shifting. So my question for you on this then is, when do you think the generations, how long until those generations ahead of us are going to have this where it's not really something new? It's just a part of the world that we're living in. That mental illness is no different than a broken leg, or or having a head injury, whatever it is. It's in that space where they talk about it today. My kids today, they'll have a tough time at school and they'll be asking us now. We've made the language in our home about mental illness. They'll have a mental illness break day. You know what? I need to have a break, Dad. And it's okay. It's not, I'll just suck it up or go, go, don't worry about those hard days. We actually acknowledge it now where it becomes our common language. So when do you think, what generation is it, the next one, the one after that, or is it now that it's going to become the normal language of our society?
That's a
That's a
very
heavy
good.
question. That's a heavy question, eh, buddy?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I spent a long time pondering this yesterday with one of the other leaders in the UK, but across multiple sectors in this field. And there's two trains of thought here. So to address the initial question head on, what we have to recognize is that this conversation, whilst we've had mental health for our entire existence on this planet, our conversation and awareness around the subject matter is growing daily, and it's growing very quickly. If you go back into 15, 20 years ago, people were talking about mindfulness, and cultures had it in there for years, but it's only recently it's become more widely accepted that actually we do have a health, more broadly speaking, in terms of physical and mental health, and we have mental hygiene, and it's okay to experience mental illness, and there's no shame. We're finding that generationally that's starting to happen, but this is a big mindset change for people who perhaps have had been taught differently, who've been post-war era maybe,
Yeah.
who've been taught that actually just get on with it. And there's some truth to that as well. Like, I'm not here to say that actually, we should all cuddle each other and all admit that we've got illness. It's okay to actually be okay. But I think what we have to recognize is that we are moving very quickly. So yes, there are many of the older generation, my generation, are very much more accustomed to this. Generations above are probably getting more aware of it. The younger generation, 100%, they come into the workplace and they go, I experience anxiety disorder and I'd like to know how you're going to help me with this, because as my employer, I feel like you should. So that terminology and that wording is definitely better at the younger generations. But here's the opposite argument, which is we have done such a great job of creating that awareness in the younger generation now. What we have to recognize is perhaps we need a bit of context to that awareness and that language now as well. So it's okay to feel anxious with a new experience. It's okay to feel certain levels of stress. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're burnt out, or it doesn't necessarily mean that you have an anxiety disorder. And I think we need to be mindful that with this increased awareness of this subject matter that we're all learning about and that we're all developing as a society with, that we can also experience a depressed week. Doesn't mean that we'll classify for clinical depression. So we just need to be mindful that with this awareness, we're not all then ill. In the same way, if you pricked your finger, your finger will hurt for a few days, and you'll maybe take some medicine if it's that bad, but that pain will subside. If you've broken your finger, then that actually that's more of a long-term thing, and it's about being able to educate people to understand that you can be anxious for a week at a time, or you can have a sudden panic attack, for example, which is worth looking into. But if it's happening regularly and frequently and it's interrupting your ability to live life to the full, then you might be struggling with anxiety, or you might have an anxiety disorder that you need to look at. So I think we're still very early on with conversations, and it's up to our generation, the generation above and below, to try and be as educated as possible and to understand that our physical health and our mental health are all in equilibrium.
So Kris, on this, I have a question for you on this, because I think I totally agree with you on that. But I have a question here also is, what's your fear about mental illness in relationship of you becoming like a person that's changing people to think about mental illness in a whole different lens in our industry? What's your biggest fear? What keeps you up at night in relationship of this movement you've created? Or you're embracing? I don't know if you created it, but you're embracing it and you're blowing it up even bigger than anyone else is right now.
Yeah, I was just the guy that started picking at the threads, and there are organizations, tons of like Chow, for example, is an organization that we're speaking to, and they've been doing this also for an equally same period. But what keeps me awake? The biggest thing for me, so I sleep quite soundly, luckily. First and foremost.
Yeah, you wait till you sleep with a sunburn, buddy.
Yeah, right. The thing for me is that at this moment in time, from a commercial perspective, this is still seen as, unlimited therapy, for example, available in 9 different languages around the world that we offer. It's a nice to have. You're talking to businesses, and here's an analogy for anyone who is in the in the food industry, which is all of you guys. You won't think twice about buying a brand new Rationale or Unox oven for £20,000 because it will save you, or $20,000 because it will save you $1,000 a year in electricity. Right? You will not think twice about that, despite the fact that will take 8-9 years to pay it back itself in terms of energy savings. You won't think about that. You'll buy 1, 2, 3, 100 for your business. But something like we offer, like the unlimited therapy, which might cost a third or a fraction of that cost, depending on the size of the organization, but will cover its cost in less than 2 months, because you're looking at saving the energy and the performance of people. People go, oh no, I just don't want to spend that money. I don't get it. And it's not fear, it's a frustration, because if you work in a high-end restaurant, you'll spend £3,000 on a load of plates because it makes the food look better or it elevates your offering, but you won't necessarily spend that £3,000 on improving the well-being of your team, which will directly have a knock-on impact to the performance, satisfaction of your guests, and the performance of your team, and the longevity of your staff, so you're not having to re-recruit every 30 days.
I hear you.
That's probably the thing that I still can't get my head around. Like, what is it that people need to hear in order to be able to make this connection?
Well, you see it clearly, is my guess. And then it's that convincing, it's that education, it's keep standing up there and telling people. And I think that takes a long time, though. Right? Like, would you agree that do you see that already in what you do, that it does take time to get people to understand what you're trying to do here?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I used to, so when I first started the project, right? So we started selling merchandise, so it was traveling globally, and it was starting conversations. That was the reason I did it initially. But then we were making profits from that. And as a not-for-profit, we had to do something that was going to create an impact. So I invested into a 24-hour tech support system in the UK, which we're looking at rolling out into Canada and America and Australia as well. And people used to message us on social media. You're like, oh my God, you're just a fat 60-year-old man driving a Ferrari, getting rich off people's misery, right? Like, we've just put in place free mental health support for everyone in the UK. Like, there's no getting rich off of any of this. Like, surely it's plain to see. And I chatted to this about at the time, we're mostly beyond that now. We don't ever, I think what we do and what we provide is so plain to see that it's hard for people to actually say, well, actually, you're just trying to get rich. The suntan isn't from a nice holiday. This is me just, sitting out in the UK for too long. But I sat down with a mate of mine, Adam Simmons, who's over in DC at the moment. And he said to me, he said, Kris, it's like turning a cruise liner and not a dinghy. He says, a dinghy you can whip around on the spot in no time at all, but a cruise liner, you put the brakes on, it's going to take 3 miles to at least start to slow down and change its course. And I always used to think, oh yeah, he's just, it's a nice analogy, and I would use it all the time. But in the last 6 months, it's really sunk in that we're not going to change the world in 4 years. We're going to change the world in 10, 20, 30 years, and we're not going anywhere. We are here for the long haul, but we need everyone on board with this, because the more people, opportunities like this, the quicker that change will start to happen, the quicker we'll slow that cruise liner down. the gravity and the sheer size of our industry globally is going to take time to reach every single last corner of it.
So, Kris, why is it now that this is becoming such an important thing in our industry? Like, why is it now? Is it because of what people? Some people saw a lot of the conversations come out of COVID. Was this a big thing before COVID? I've done tons of shows around people all wanting to help in this space with other people like yourself, in Canada and in the US around this subject. We've seen some companies like Cisco, like Unilever, different companies out there that are starting projects in this space as well. Why is this all coming now? Is it just timing, or are we getting more open to expressing ourselves around these we have? What do you think it is?
I think as a society, we're probably more open to this conversation. The COVID, which was hellish for everyone, and specifically, for hospitality and, Canada as well. Christ, you guys were first to shut and definitely the last the ones to open in the world, unfortunately. It had a big impact on people, and those who perhaps never even understood what mental illness was, maybe experienced it for the first time. So in terms of conversation, we've all had a shared experience that makes us realize, but this is not a new thing. And I need to apologize that I didn't create this 20, 30, 40 years ago, because in our sector, in our industry, mental illness has always been prevalent. It's always been there. And the rates of mental illness within hospitality. So we did a study for over 1,000 people, and it showed that 4 out of 5 people have experienced mental illness whilst working in the industry. Now, as a disclaimer, that's not because they work in the industry that they're unwell. It could be a myriad of different reasons. But what we have to recognize is that rates of burnout and high levels of stress and demands not matching resources, it's going to make even the healthiest of people unwell. It's going to make unwell people more unwell. So this is not a new thing. It's just that I think there are voices in this space now that allow this subject matter to be discussed, and it's not going away. And I often joke, I'm wearing a t-shirt that says the Burnt Chef Project on it, right?
Yeah.
But I often joke that we should have just called it, that's just the way things are. That's just hospitality.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And it's interesting that you laugh, because I have never, ever said that statement and someone not laugh, because it's so true.
True. It is. And you're absolutely right.
It's so true. And we've lived by that for years. That's just hospitality. You're expected to work long hours. You're expected for your leadership team not to know your name. You're expected to leave your shit at the door and get on with it, despite the fact, it's having a big impact on you. And for the first time, we're saying, actually, no, this isn't sustainable. We're losing people out of our sector, either because they've left or because they've ended their own lives because they're so unwell. It's not acceptable. It's criminal that this is being allowed to happen. And so I think more for it. We need more people in this space, all tackling the various subject matters to try and improve this industry as a whole, because it is a fantastic career. It's a brilliant industry.
So Kris, I have a question on that. I just want to this question. One of my last questions here, because I know you got to get to that golf game. And I do want to ask you this question: is so you said 4 out of 5 are suffering right now. Will that number ever go down to 3 or 2 or 1? Will you see that number ever go the other way? Because it seems, I always see this within any medical or research or anything else. The numbers typically don't go backwards. They always go up. So do you think with doing all this stuff, bringing it to the forefront, having these discussions, having amazing people like yourself and some in programs like the Burnt Chef Project, do you think that number will ever go the other way? Will there be a day that you wake up and go, you know what, it's 2 now out of 4? Or 2 out of 5?
I think you're never going to eradicate it completely, because it's health. You're never going to live a life without catching a cold, the flu, or breaking a limb. Hopefully these things don't happen, but in reality they're going to happen because we're not built like machines, right? So I think yes, the number can go down, But I think that we have to recognize that we have a moral obligation and a duty to ensure that this industry doesn't remain harmful to the individuals in it. And what I mean by that is we need to take a proactive role on tackling work-related stress, which is one of the leading causes of mental illness. We need to make sure that as an organization and as leaders, as individuals, we're identifying where the pinch points are, and rather going, we can't do anything about it, look at how we can change it. And it's like coming to a river, right? And seeing people in the river, and you get in and you pull them out, and then you see someone else and you're like, oh, get in, and you pull them out. But unless you go up the river and find out why people are falling in the first place, you're still going to keep getting in and pulling them out. So we need to work out what we need to do, whether that's, we offer leadership training globally with a qualification, whether it's mental health training, whether it's training on menopause, whether we give people, the time and space to develop new rota systems that don't involve being given on a Sunday for the following Monday. They're given 3 months in advance, and there'll be listeners out there who go 3 months in advance, no chance. But there are organizations who are doing that now, and their retention rates are improving as a result of that, and the health and well-being of their teams is improving. So yes, that number will go down. It's going to take time. And what we need to start doing now is, rather than saying, dealing with the facts of the fact that the industry is in trouble, is actually start promoting the organizations who are doing those fantastic things and who do have a healthy team and who do celebrate differences and independence and who have the right working structures and the right cultures. And we need to be really shining a spotlight on these organizations, because we're a very competitive industry, and we're all going to get on board, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. I know time's up here because we got to get to your golf game. And we got to make sure it's important. We got to have that time for you today.
It's
all the great things you do.
It's the first game of this year. If you guys have ever been to the UK, you'll know that the weather is not usually this nice. And one of the most interesting things for me of being a CEO in this field is that people always hold me to account. They're like, Kris, you're the guy who should embody absolutely everything what it is to be a perfectly well person, right? And I'm human. I still maybe I drink too much, or maybe I stay up too late, or I don't eat the right foods at times. But one thing that I've learned is that I have to demonstrate discipline.
Yeah.
And what I mean discipline is that I have to show you that it is okay not to work at all times, and that if you've made a commitment to do something that is not work related, you shouldn't feel guilty about it, and that you should see it through. So I'm apologetic to your listeners, but if you're there listening now thinking, oh, I've just got one more email, or I've got, perhaps I should work an extra shift today. No, make time for yourself, because if you don't do it, no one else will.
You know what? That's a great way to end this. And I just want to thank you so much. First of all, what you're doing for our industry. We got some exciting things that we're going to do more with you from a Cisco perspective. But thank you what you're doing, Kris. Like, honestly, first of all, it's a complete honor of meeting you at the Restaurants Canada show. And then just getting to know you more and more. Hopefully I can make it over there one day, or we'll invite you over here again and do some stuff with you here. But thanks again for everything you do for our industry. Everyone can, where the website is, theBurnedChefProject.com. Go check it out. Kris, you rock, dude, and enjoy your day on the course, and get some aloe vera. We'll send you some aloe vera for your sunburn.
Yeah, I'm all sorted. Let's
there you go. Awesome. Thanks so much, Kris. Take care. Okay.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
You bet. To everyone else, you know what? That was amazing. Thanks so much, Kris, for joining us today on the restaurant. I got to call it the Restaurant Canada, the Daily Restaurant Podcast Show is what we changed it. It's going to take a while to get to our new name here on the SVK network. But thanks to Kris again from the Burnt Chef Project. Kris's personal journey and his passion that drives his mission to really eradicate mental health and the stigma in the hospitality industry is unbelievable. His stories, his experience is unbelievable. Nothing like it out there on this planet. I believe he is doing something that we all need to embrace, and we all need to do this. Now, remember, if you know someone or yourself is struggling with mental health issues in the hospitality industry, we all have been there. I remember the days I worked in restaurants. Reach out and find support within your community. Don't do this on your own. You need help. You need to talk to people, have a coffee, go and do it. But together, we can really create a healthier and more compassionate environment. We really can do this together. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations like you listened today with Kris on the Restaurant Daily, or the Daily Restaurant Podcast Show on the SVK Network. But thanks again to everyone listening today. And we'll chat soon. Thanks so much.